What's good? It's Woog. Please like the video, subscribe to the channel if you're into the fight talk. I just saw Oleksandr Usyk defeat Anthony Joshua via unanimous decision. And, you know, I picked Anthony Joshua to actually win this one via decision. I thought that he was going to make more use of his underrated, developing, improving jab. And you know, I'm just glad that the person who appeared to win, who to my eyes, and I'm assuming y'all's eyes, who should have won the fight, did indeed get rewarded with the W. It's just so many times in boxing, it doesn't happen. So this was just outstanding for boxing. Not necessarily because Usyk won, but because this was such a high-profile fight for 3 of the 4 heavyweight titles. That's as big as it gets. A lot of, you know, casual fans probably tuned in, even though they probably don't know who Oleksandr Usyk is, although they do now. But it was a highly spotlit fight, and it delivered with the action and the drama, and it featured a lot of the sweet science and the skill in boxing that many people hear of. But if they're not into the nuance and the technique involved in boxing, then they view it as like basically fighting. But boxing enthusiasts and purists will insist that no, there's a sweet science to the game, and that thought is a little esoteric for a lot of people who are just casually watching but don't know what the hell we're talking about when we talk about the sweet science and the nuance and angles and level changes and feints and all of these different things. Well, here again, big fight, huge stadium, so many viewers, and it delivered. It's not marred in controversy. The people aren't fighting about, you know, who should have won the fight but wasn't credited the win, and just none of that mess. None of that mess is involved in this one. We just got a fight, and the better man, at least tonight, won the fight, deservingly so. So I just want to say I'm happy about that. Also, we can dispel any idea that Anthony Joshua has any sort of like a stamina issue or a toughness issue. Now, we could talk about the sweet science issues and where he's flawed from a boxing standpoint, but you can't say that he doesn't have guts, that he doesn't have heart, that he doesn't have a chin, and that he can't go a hard 12 rounds, even though, you know, he obviously was weakened and basically totally spent by the end of the 12th. That was just because Usyk, who the hell knew that Usyk was going to come out to that fast of a start, win basically the first 3 rounds. AJ won some of the middle rounds, but Usyk, to me, won the 10th, 11th, and 12th round. And after seeing the 10th and 11th, you know, the commentators and everybody kind of figured AJ should at least need a knockdown, if not like a knockout, a knockdown to catch up in the scorecards. Well, Usyk really beat the hell out of AJ in that 12th round, to where AJ's back was against the ropes and he was just kind of sticking his tongue out to save face because he was getting cleaned up in that 12th. So any sort of plausible deniability that the judges might have had to rob Oleksandr Usyk of that win, it would have been disastrous if AJ got credited the decision win, especially because of how strong Usyk finished the fight, to where to all onlookers, anybody spectating could walk away from that saying, yes, Oleksandr Usyk should have won, even if you weren't going round by round, which that is how you're supposed to go, and that is how fights are judged. But if you were just kind of casually doing it, where it's like, yeah, Usyk won the first 3 or 3 out of the first 4, and say they split some of the middle rounds, but Usyk apparently won the 10th and 11th, and there's no question about the 12th round. So we went into the 12th thinking AJ should be behind. Again, anything's possible with the judging, but thinking that AJ's behind. But then the way that Usyk closed out the 12th, that should have removed all doubt, to where if they did rob Oleksandr Usyk, it would have been in plain sight, and it would have been blatant, and it would have been one of the most offensive and obvious robberies that you could have imagined, right? I was thinking after the fight was over, maybe 7-5. I thought that 8-4 would have been more equitable. But this was just a highly skilled fight. And it's amazing that Oleksandr Usyk, because I thought he was going to fade in the second half of the fight. I thought he was going to be easier to find, especially with AJ's jab, which, why didn't AJ throw more jabs? I mean, it's not like Usyk was just countering over the top of the jab and making him pay for that. But, I mean, AJ was fighting in a way where instead of like a bladed stance where one hand is clearly closer, your lead hand is so much closer to the opponent than your stronger power hand. AJ was more here with kind of a high guard to where he was able to touch Usyk with the left and the right, because he shortened the right hand. He's not bringing it from way back here like Wilder does, right? He was more here. So yes, he's not generating the same power with the right hand, but he is, boom, because it's almost equal distance from Usyk's face as AJ's lead hand is. So I thought that that was an interesting. He also did the same thing against Povetkin when he was having difficulty in early rounds, to where he made that adjustment, started shortening his right hand punches up, and was able to start catching Povetkin coming in. Well, he caught Usyk a couple times coming in with that right hand, but Usyk, to his credit, took the punches that he did receive from AJ. Look, I don't think AJ was truly just blasting him with his most devastating punches, but that is more a credit to Usyk's defense. He wasn't able to hit Usyk with the hardest of his power punches, and Usyk, I thought, was going to do a little less of this in the later rounds. I thought that his upper body and his legs were going to tire in the middle rounds, and I thought AJ was going to be able to touch him a lot more easily and then harder, to where Usyk would be in trouble in the late rounds. But I thought Usyk was still, with his experience and his boxing IQ, was going to be able to get out of danger and bring it to the end of the 12th, to where he loses a decision as opposed to getting stopped. Well, Usyk again got out to an early lead on the scorecards, where, I mean, damn, that was such an effective thing to do, to win the first couple rounds. So then the audience and probably the judges are starting to say, hey, Usyk won that one, and Usyk won that one. So now AJ's going to have to do something to change their opinion. Why does AJ win this next round? Because he didn't win those early rounds. So I'm just saying, the psychology behind judging and behind spectating, it's an expectations game. So after you see a guy win a couple, you start kind of filling in the gaps and the blanks in your own mind, right? Or with your own eyes even. But Usyk not only won the first few rounds, but he won the last few rounds, and that just paid dividends, I feel, in the scoring here. And you know, he does those dips with his body, where he's moving with the torso. But I thought that because he was moving so much in those early rounds, that I was thinking he was sure to fade, especially when AJ then seemingly won back-to-back rounds, right, towards the middle rounds, where it looked like Usyk was slowing down. But man, Usyk just started to find AJ again in the 9th, and even more so in the 10th and the 11th rounds. And obviously he had the great 12th round he had, but man, AJ looked like he was spent by the end of that fight. And you know what, there is no choice from AJ but to take this immediate rematch. It's like, what else is AJ gonna do? But like, where is AJ's confidence level with Oleksandr Usyk in that matchup? Because AJ, to me, he didn't box a bad fight. Usyk was just better than him in this fight. But it's not like AJ collapsed, you know what I mean, and just had some like breakdown, or his fundamentals fell apart. He didn't do any of these things. He did box to the best of his ability that night. I still think he could have thrown more jabs, or just keep that left hand out so you could just kind of blind Usyk, so you could throw your heavy stuff behind that. That's what I was thinking he was angling towards, but then it seemed like he stopped throwing the jab as consistently. Maybe he got discouraged because he wasn't touching Usyk with it, because Usyk, again, his upper body movement and keeping his head on the swivel, he was able to slip a lot more punches than I thought he was going to be able to slip. I thought maybe that stuff was going to work in the early rounds, but being, again, he's going into his mid-30s now, plus he's 20 pounds heavier than when he was fighting at cruiser. I didn't expect him to be clicking on all cylinders with the defense down the middle and late rounds the way that he was. But man, AJ's body language at the end of the fight, if anybody else in the arena or stadium thought that AJ won in the fight, he didn't sell them on that with his body language, because he wasn't convinced of that. So, you know, good thing they might have thought that, because he didn't. Like my dad said, I talked to him right after the fight. He said that if AJ was able to and had more energy after the fight, he would have probably walked those 3 championship belts across the ring and over to Usyk's corner. Which, I mean, AJ's a decent enough guy to where he just might have done that too, because AJ, nothing about AJ and his demeanor told me that he thought he won that fight. So yeah, great night for boxing, just because a big fight delivered in the drama. Not because Usyk won, but because this was a high-stakes fight, a super meaningful fight, 3 of the 4 titles on the line, and the better man of the night won in a way where even casual fans could walk away from that one saying, I saw boxing skills at the highest level. So that's what it's all about. That's what I've been hearing about with the sweet science and the technique and this and that. They just saw it on the big stage. And, you know, hats off to both guys for giving a hell of an effort. I had it 8 rounds to 4. It could have possibly been 9-3, maybe 7-5, but I didn't see that. I didn't see a 7-5 fight. I thought 8-4 was better. But yeah, let me know what you think. So the rematch, it has to be next. What do you think about the rematch? Damn, you know, AJ's gonna have to think about some things. But I've heard people suggest, like Richard Dwyer, online boxing analyst, who, to his credit, was the only person I saw. I mean, maybe others were saying, we're picking Usyk. Not saying Usyk's got a good shot at winning this because of this and that, but actually picking Usyk. Richard Dwyer did that. But he was saying for AJ to win that he's got to basically play bully ball, that he's got to come forward and he's got to like impose his will in the early rounds, like George Foreman versus Joe Frazier or George Foreman versus Ken Norton, that he had to do that. And then was asking the question, is that AJ's temperament? Which we all know that AJ isn't that type of a fast starter where he's just, you know, hell on wheels in the early rounds. We get that. But I don't know even if he employed that, if that would be the way to go. Because if you empty the clip in the first couple rounds and you didn't get Usyk out of there, now you're really in trouble. You know, I still think that AJ can win a boxing fight against Usyk. There are ways that I think he could do it. I've got to think a little harder on what those ways might be, but I do think that they involve more jabs and work to the body. My dad actually suggested maybe jabs and punches to the body, but just a heavy diet of that, at least in the early rounds. Don't waste your power punches. You're not going to find them early and stuff. And you just have to do better to win rounds, to keep the jab out there, because if you're jabbing, he's moving. And again, it's not like he was countering with devastating over-the-top counters. Now, he would throw that jab followed by a right hook. I'm talking about Usyk. He would take his lead hand and kind of like paw it. They were calling it a jab on the broadcast, but it was almost like a cat-like paw, where he would jab and then just turn his wrist over and throw that. He was doing some of that, and that was pretty effective. But it's not like, you know, Shane Mosley or Oscar De La Hoya versus Shane Mosley 1, where De La Hoya was trying to jab and getting his lead hand and power hand, which is his lead hand, left hand for Oscar, getting that going, where Shane Mosley was so quick that he was able to counter over Oscar's jab with a lightning speed right hand. It's not like Usyk was countering AJ's jab with that. So I think AJ should have thrown more jabs, but that doesn't necessarily mean that he wins in this rematch. We got some things to figure out in further analysis on this one before we can start picking. Maybe some people are comfortable enough already to say, I already know who I got in the rematch. Got to give this one some thought. The fight just happened. I'd like to rewatch it. Exciting fight, man. I was watching the 10th round expecting AJ to start, because it looked like he was mounting a comeback in the middle rounds. So I thought, and Usyk started looking like he was fading 7th, 8th round. So AJ in the 9th and then the 10th round, I thought that the 10th round going into the 10th round was going to be a big round for AJ, because it had to be a big round for AJ. And instead, I just saw AJ's head start getting rocked back and Usyk start to come forward and pour it on and just convincingly take that round. And I'm like, damn. And I'm watching this round, hearing how quiet the crowd is, and it just felt a little surreal, like, wow, this feels pretty dramatic and pretty consequential right now. But yeah, just an outstanding fight. Let me know what your initial thoughts are in the wake of this heavyweight showdown. Again, Oleksandr Usyk is your new WBA, IBF, and WBO champion. Hats off to him. Like, this was his moment. He was a badass before this, but man, this just makes him a generational great type fighter, you know? And for those of us who've been watching him for years, you could find some joy in seeing him rewarded on this massive a level. So yeah, hats off, and hats off to AJ for fighting a hell of a fight as well. Yeah, this is going to be interesting moving forward. But yeah, Oleksandr Usyk shook up the heavyweight division, if not the world, right? So yeah, let me know your thoughts in the comments. Please like the video, subscribe to the channel if you are into the fight talk. I'm Woog. Thanks for tuning in.